Thank you for joining United Policyholders tonight for our contents intensive webinar on, and that also includes collecting depreciation. And so you have an interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. So you want to choose your language there. And then we turn this over to Karina to walk you through exactly how to do this if you speak Spanish. Thank you, Karina. All right, let's get going. If you'd like to follow along with tonight's slide deck, if you go to this section on our website, you'll see under tonight's event, you will see this neatly highlighted for your viewing pleasure here, where to find the deck. And that way you've got that as a reference as we go. And then the recording will be published to the site later. So a little bit about United Policyholders. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that has been providing disaster expertise for the last 31 years. We're, as I mentioned, not for profit, not for sale. We're funded by donations and grants. And we're a resource for consumers of insurance in all 50 states. This is, we are supplemented with our team up. We have a small professional staff, mostly based in California, but also in some other states. We partner heavily with government and other nonprofits. And then we have our volunteers, our survivor volunteers, and then our consumer focused professionals joining us. And we have with us today, and I'll introduce them later, we have Lois, Corey, and Annie joining us with that from our team up today. We have 3 programs: our Roadmap to Recovery, that is the workshop that we're doing today, where we provide guidance on insurance, restoring your assets, and getting back home after a catastrophic loss. Our Roadmap to Preparedness program is where we take those lessons learned, what people wish they had known before a disaster, and share that information to educate people to be better prepared in case they experience a catastrophic loss. And then we take those pain points and those larger lessons learned and work with regulators and legislators to improve that playing field and make the claims process a much safer space for insurance consumers. Just to point out a few resources for you, if you're with the Marshall Fire, this is our library for you. It's got Colorado specific resources with step-by-step guidance, links to professional help, sample letters, claims forms, our Survivor Speaks tips, and then those upcoming events. For California, this would be your library. California 2020, there's a separate library there. The Colorado 2020 fires, there's one there. And if anyone is joining us today from the California 2022 fires, I did not have that slide in here, but if you go here under Recovery Help, the second tab is Disaster Recovery. And you can find that specific library to help you with the process. Fine print, this workshop is intended to be general guidance only. We are not providing legal advice. Our speakers are volunteering their time as educators. So if you have a specific legal question, we recommend you consult an experienced attorney in policyholder matters. Today's presenters, and Annie, I do not have you on here, my apologies. So UP staff, myself, I will make myself visible here for a minute. My name's Valerie Brown. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of United Policyholders. With me is our California liaison, Annie Barber. And so she will be working on the webinar with us. And then we have 2 additional staff in the background. We have Carolyn Winter, who is our United Policyholders image there that you see if you're seeing our panelists, and also Ava Nguyen, who is working with our Spanish language interpretation tonight. Our team up volunteers, I have Corey Locke, public adjuster in California. Corey, thank you so much for joining us. And then Lois Pratt, who is one of our Team Up volunteers, and her home was lost in the 2020 East Troublesome Fire in Colorado. And to add to Annie's, which should be on the slide deck, Annie also lost her home in the 2017 Tubbs Fire in California. So thank you all for joining. And my slide, we will skip me quickly, but that way you can see what I look like at least. Corey, this is information. If you have questions for Corey, you can reach out to him afterwards. And then Lois, this is just a little bit about her. Do point out that Lois and her husband, John, had provided their inventory list as a sample. It's a great resource for content. It's on our website. I mean, it has hot links to take you to current pricing, which is great. And then if you're in the state of Colorado, they have this Survivor Speak, excuse me, I'm trying to highlight and I can't do that sharing my screen. They have a Survivor Speak publication, Getting Insured to Pay the Penalty Interest, which is a helpful tool if you need it. So the goal of today's presentation, we just want to help you collect the full amount your insurer owes you for your personal property items in the least time-consuming and painless manner possible. And we're going to walk you through, getting to that and focusing on those, that troubleshooting that you need to have in the contents process. So we have a webinar from March of 2022 that outlines like basic steps of creating your inventory. And this more is for problem solving and troubleshooting and just getting it done and getting paid out. So guiding principles to start us with, you want to focus on documenting the full extent and value of your losses. You want to give your adjuster, your insurer, a chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover. Leverage and negotiation are key. Get help when you need it. And then, these two words that drive so much of what we do. This is the best demeanor we have found for people to adopt during this process, being politely assertive. And that's a skill because this is a very infuriating, painful process. We know that, but treating this as a business transaction and being that politely assertive person, taking care of your needs will carry you far. And just a couple of reminders here. Recovery is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Take your time, take breaks when you need it. And take care of yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, just be sure to think of this as a business transaction. There's this tension between the policyholder, you, and the insurance company. Obviously, they want to minimize what's paid out on the claim. They're a business. They want to, keep their profits. You want to be maximized, and so you're advocating for yourself to get a maximum payout. And the adjusters may not match up with you. They may not have a lot of experience. They may have a personality that is totally backwards to the way you think and react. And so, just treat this in that business category. And our premise here is that, knowledge equals power. And the more you understand about your insurance benefits, your rights, and value of your losses, the more you're going to receive in benefits and the smoother this claim is going to go. It does not always work that way, but we feel that generally that is a better strategy. It certainly keeps you from leaving money on the table. Recommendations to speak up, presenting your request clearly and in writing, explain what you need, when you need it, why you're entitled to it, keep it very clear. Bullet points are great. Mark up your policy, and when they tell you something is so in your policy, ask them to show you where it says that in your policy. If it's not in your policy, it's it might be their guidelines, but it's not in that legal contract. And so, those gray areas you want to be able to take advantage of. And always document, keep that claims journal, take notes on who you talked to, number, call, date, time, what promises were made to you, keep yourself organized, keep your information together. And take a deep breath before we get into the actual presentation here. All right, and let's get going. So today's topics, we're going to run through 4 different sections, doing a refresher on how contents claims work, talking in detail about depreciation, tips on finishing your list, the next steps after you've turned in that list, and then we've got do our best to answer. And then for those of you putting questions in the Q&A, if we are able to get to them, we will. If not, we'll hopefully some of them will relate to questions we've already got. And then for Annie and Lois and Corey, please feel free at any point on any of these topics just to pop in there and share what you have to say on that topic, okay? Don't feel like you're talking over me. I'm sure the interpreter will be happy to have someone who speaks a little more measured than I do, so. All right, and so the refresher on how contents claims work. Corey, I'm assuming you're going to have a fair bit to say here once we get into this section, so feel free to jump in at any time. Our basic guidance is you really need to know your policy, what your limits are, and how your insurance company works, right? So read that complete policy, checking those endorsements, scheduled items, if you've got any of those that will provide an additional insured value. You want to check
just a little bit, Val.
I'm sorry, too fast, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Let me slow down. There we go. So check your sublimits based on the type of peril. You might have a limitation for theft that says, we're only going to cover your jewelry to $500 for theft, but your disaster does not have that exclusion. So it's important to know what types of perils are in your policy. And then being organized, saving your receipts, scanning them, keeping your correspondence, and just staying on track of these things.
I would probably say that this is probably the most critical starting point for everyone regarding contents. You have to know your policy by reading your policy. And quite honestly, the state of the insurance industry currently is that the person you're likely dealing with has never read your policy, don't know how to read your policy, and they're reading from bullet points or talking points. So when you've recommended, just as I recommend, get your policy, read your policy, know your policy. This is your first stepping point for any contents claim and any conversation with your insurance company, because you need to put them on notice that you understand it, that every single thing you say to them is that it's measured. And the best thing that you can do to check your adjuster that you're talking with is ask them a pointed question. Where is that? How do I find that? What does it say regarding that? By then, you'll be able to figure out if they're just a drone or someone that actually knows the policy.
Great points. Thank you. And while we're going through this review here, just to talk about that flow of contents coverage. Each state, each disaster, your insurance commissioner may mandate or strongly recommend that a certain amount of your contents coverage be advanced to you. That varies, even if it's the same insurance carrier. What the Department of Insurance in California would require for the 2020 fires might be different than the Camp Fire, for example, or what they required for the Marshall Fire in Colorado this past year. So, being aware of what your Department of Insurance has put out as far as those bulletins go, very helpful to know. Your insurer will provide you in advance.
I think we lost her.
I totally dropped off, didn't I?
There we go.
I am back again.
Good deal.
Sorry about that. That was fun. So then you will have your ACV payments once you submit your inventory. And then when you're providing your proof of expenditures, that's when they're going to pay you that replacement cost. And as Corey said, just knowing what your policy says, what your limits, that information is key. This is just an example to show you. Most policies will have your personal property as coverage C, except for State Farm, they call it coverage B. Some other insurers might call it differently, but be aware of that. Okay, here's another example. And yet another example. This is the State Farm, as you can see it here. And then going to those special sublimits when we were talking about knowing what your peril was. So firearms in this example here below, and item G is limited to $2,500 if the loss is by the peril is theft. It might not be called out anywhere else. So understanding what your special limits and those coverages are.
And your adjuster may not know that there's a limitation, but only for theft. They might start quoting you, oh, you have a limitation and it's 2,500 for firearms or money or whatever it is. Money will be limited no matter what. But generally, silverware, goldware, and firearms all have a limitation only for theft. If they start talking about that for fire, then you're dealing with a newbie or someone that's never read a policy.
Right, and do, again, as Corey mentioned, making sure they understand your policy as well as you do.
Right.
And holding them to that. Just a refresher, that these are items that are not usually covered. So if it's specifically insured, like jewelry, art, with their own special coverages, they're covered elsewhere, so they're not part of your general policy. Animals, birds, fish. If you've got subtenants or roommates, their items are not covered. Motor vehicles, recreational vehicles. And then these are the terms that we're going to talk about a lot today. So just understanding replacement cost, we're going to say RC without thinking, actual cash value, ACV, depreciation holdback. These are just terms we use. They're in your policy. Knowing what those definitions are, and then making sure we define our terms before we dive into this with you. And then for replacement costs, most homeowners policies, but not all, are replacement cost policies. And this is just the price it would be to actually repair or replace that item with a new item. Your actual cash value, some people will call it the Craigslist price, but it really is that price a willing buyer would have paid you as a willing seller immediately before the loss. It's highly subjective. It feeds into that depreciation formula at the bottom. Some policies do limit payouts to ACV, and that's all they pay. So it's important to know what type of policy you have. Okay, and then as we mentioned on the flow of the insurance funds, the ACV is paid, and then the replacement costs in most policies. And this is the type of language you'll see in your policy that says how they're going to do that. And here's an example of what that would look like, right? So I need to buy a new couch. I lost my couch. What is the value of that couch an instant before the fire? What are they deducting for that depreciation, wear and tear, age, condition or age typically are what's subtracted. And so that ACV is that value here. The depreciation is what they're taking off, and they're not going to pay you that depreciation until you buy that new couch. And Corey, if I bobble any of this, step right in.
No, you're doing great, Val. I wouldn't have said anything different.
I
right.
can add, the real thing to that couch. We did replace the couch. We had 2 couches, one upstairs that was fairly new. I'm going to say we spent $5,000 on it, and they gave us, probably $4,500 because it was so new. Then we had a large sectional couch in the basement that was really old and well loved and used. When we bought it 15 years ago, it was $6,000, I believe. And when we got that, we started in the replacement phase. We decided to, because they gave us $700 for that couch, the big couch downstairs. So we did not replace the upstairs couch. We replaced the downstairs couch. and got a great big sectional for $10,000. So we really recouped a lot of money by replacing the older couch.
Good point. Great
Thank
strategy.
you for that real example, 'cause that helps, yeah. What were you saying, Corey?
I said that was a great point and a great strategy. I think that we're talking about replacement costs, but the thing we need to emphasize is it's not the cost that you may have paid 20 years ago for it. It's whatever the current value is on the market. So I've seen some questions that have come up about people saying, well, I purchased it so long ago, it was X, and now it's Y. Well, you always list whatever the current value is. You could have gotten a rockin' deal, and 20 years later, it's now 100 times more than what you paid for it. You list the value of what it is 100 times more, then take the depreciation off the current value, not what you paid for it 20 years ago.
So
Thank
Val,
you.
I think
Yes.
that it's Lois. There's a question in the chat. Can you explain that again, Lois? I believe that that's what they're referring to.
Okay, I'll be happy to. We had two couches. One was new and I think it was smaller, and we paid $5,000 for it maybe 2 years ago. And they gave us $4,500 in actual cash value because it was so new. We had another couch in the basement, a big sectional couch that was much larger and much more used, much more well-loved. We bought that 15 years ago for $6,000. When, so you submit your list and the company gives you what they think it's worth, that actual cash value. I saw some people were saying, how do we determine that? The insurance company depreciates it and they come up with the actual cash value. So they told us the actual cash value of that sectional couch in the basement was $700. So when we came to a point where, okay, we're not going to get to limits unless we start replacing things, and we'd like a couch, we did not get a smaller couch. We got the big one that was depreciated so much more. So, and we paid $10,000 for that couch because it was the same size as the one we lost. That was only $6,000. So we recouped $9,300 on our replacement.
So it pays to not be impulsive and to kind of think this through and make sure.
I agree with that. We were very slow to replace things.
Mhm.
Because we waited until the insurance company gave us what they were going to depreciate things. And then we picked and chose, like we had a Bobcat, a skid steer thing that you snow plow. We had a mile of a road that we have to plow. So they gave us $30,000 for the Bobcat, actual cash value. To replace it is $100,000. And we still need to plow the road. So we did replace it. So we recouped $70,000. And that's how you get to limit. Replace those big items that you really do need.
That's an interesting point, Lois. If any of us deal with Fair Plan, there's actually a specific language within Fair Plan's policy that machinery that's in service to the land, it actually falls under the coverages for the house. So it sounds like you actually were able to utilize something different and secure the machinery under your contents coverage, which was a great benefit for you to max out whatever was left.
And I do think we fought for that. That wasn't automatic.
Great points on all. Let's just wrap on this section. So documenting and valuing your personal property. So if they're insisting on a detailed inventory, you're going to gather all the records, receipts, photos you have to give them as complete and accurate a list as you can. And then when you submit it, of course, you're going to take what they give you back and you're going to trust it, but verify it, right? Looking at did they excessively depreciate? Did they swap out your item? Your Waterford bowl versus your Walmart bowl, Pyrex, huge price difference, paying attention to that. The slide has a few tools that are available for you, so please take advantage of those. And obviously there are many more tools here. So this is just to give you an idea of what's available on our website. Give us a deep breath here before we jump on our next section. And so we're going to talk about depreciation here. And Corey, I know you'll have a fair amount to say on this, and Annie and Lois, please chime in with your real world experiences on doing this. So depreciation, just to start with that definition, it's the loss in value due to wear and tear, age and condition. These are some other terms you might see. It's negotiable. So the more depreciation your insurer applies, the less money you're going to collect up front. There is no official standard on how much they can depreciate your property. Depending on your state, it may be defined very specifically that it must include age and condition. So you need to understand what your legal rights are in your state. But asking them where they come up with that, challenging those pieces, right? Because it's affecting your pocketbook. And then be aware of those items that should not be depreciated. Antiques, fine art, jewelry, things that would appreciate in value. And not very many people are successful in this last suggestion, but you can always ask in writing that they give you a copy of the depreciation schedule that they use. If you've got questions, and a lot of questions on this, just ask them for them to tell you how they do this. And then in the chat, we have a publication that will take you straight to that on depreciation. Fair depreciation, and Corey, please feel free to chime in here. As I said earlier, you're considering both age and condition.
Yeah, that's a piece that's very critical. And when you get a request from your adjuster, we need you to age and condition. That really goes towards the software consideration. A lot of the carriers use what was formerly called Exactware, now it's called Verisk, for contents. And in that individual line item, you have not only the type of item, the number of items, but you have something called the age and condition. And condition is simply, is this new, above average, average, below average? And that really is crucial for what that item is on how fast it's going to depreciate. So if they go ahead and list all your items at undervalued, at not just average but below average, it's going to really affect the amount of depreciation that you are receiving for your loss. So you got to be hypercritical about what they do for these large 3,000-4,000 line item inventories that's going to come back to you. It's very simple for a carrier to highlight every single thing in your inventory and then just do a global change on it and put it every item as below average. And then you just get creamed for the depreciation. So aging and conditioning each individual item, which in California is required on individual items, not globally. It's discouraged, and you can't use a depreciation guide in California. It all has to be based upon age and condition. So, you know, that's a critical part of your inventory.
We added, we also used new, like new, above average, average.
And if you're one of those people that has a room, or you don't have children, but you have a room that you don't use much, and you have a couch in there that's 10 years old, but you haven't had kids bouncing on it, there aren't any stains, it has very little use, you need to make a notation about that.
Good point.
Corey, we have a question in the chat from Chris Fuller. Does State Farm use the new above average, average, below average categories for depreciation? You know?
Yeah, they do. Because it's built into the Exactware software like that. There is nothing that differentiates that in the Verisk Exactware for that. And it's also a piece that's going to be really zeroed in by the adjuster, that if you're listing everything in your inventory as being less than 5 years of age, they're going to be absolutely kick this back to you and say that's not even possible. And then they might even get a little bit more assertive and start saying, well, how much do you make? And, you know, give us your tax records. I mean, I've seen this go this way when people don't provide aging appropriately for the items, because not everything in your house is 5 years or newer, unless you had a prior fire, and then that makes total sense. I mean, I've personally gone through a loss where I lost everything in my house. And then, you know, and in that case, you can absolutely say everything in my house is X years, because that's when it started, when I bought everything. But usually everything has a varied year with that individual item. So to quickly answer your question again, yes, State Farm uses that new above average, average, below average.
Thank you for answering that. And this just gets into why it matters. And I think Lois's example really shows why it matters, you know. And her strategy of taking that most heavily depreciated couch and replacing that allowed her to, you know, take the money from the one that was not heavily depreciated and being able to replace just the one at that time, right? So let's see, for all items that are covered under replacement cost value, unless they relax or waive the requirement, they're usually going to require you to replace and submit proof. I know we had a question in the chat about, I think it's already been answered, just about, you know, if I exceed policy limits, you know, in my list, will they just pay me out? And that that's where depreciation matters there as well.
It does.
And we fought for, my husband would call and they depreciated firearms, and they shouldn't have. They depreciated books heavily. I'm a retired teacher. We had a lot of books. He fought line item by line item, and he won on some of them, and they didn't move on others. And, you know, there's no rhyme or reason on why they moved on some and why they didn't on others.
You know, the book option is really interesting, because there are so many varied areas that now you can purchase books, eBay, thrift books, even Amazon has used books. You know, there is a lot of value that's still held in books, and not everything is going to be available on, you know, on a brand new basis. But once you list for your inventory that you are buying this from a secondary source and not a retail source, there is no depreciation applied to it, because that is the market value.
Yes.
Right,
Nice.
right.
So Corey, there is a question in the chat that doesn't sound familiar to me, but should I be entitled to being provided an ESX file?
That's a term that's used with Exactware, and ESX is the raw file. So if you are writing your estimate, you can be kind to your insurance company if you are actually are in the business to write in Exactware, or you have a professional do it in Exactware. You can provide the carrier with an ESX. I would begin that conversation at the start and say, how should we present our documentation to you? If the carrier is saying, we want you to utilize this Excel sheet because part of Exactware allows for the export and import of an Excel sheet. And that's the way some of the carriers are able to have you put it on their Excel sheet and then import it back into Exactware. The ESX is just the completed product that it's in the system, and then you could automatically just trade that back and forth. If you have access to Exactware, you can then pop that in that raw file, and all your documentation for your estimate is there. So if the question is, do I have access to it? Yeah, you have access in California under 2071 to all claims related documents. And that, as I have fought with State Farm over, is a claims related document, and they have given in.
But should he expect, sorry, should he expect that they supply that to him for him to use?
They would probably, unless you're in the biz of knowing how to use Exactware or have a professional, you would have to make the request. More than likely, as we have seen with State Farm, they want you to fill out the Excel sheet, which they then would weaponize within their own use of Exactware. But again, start with the conversation saying, you know, I expect that you're going to give me your Excel sheet that you've worked on, not or the ESX file, and I'm going to work out of your ESX so we're not playing games. But yeah, I would say absolutely ask for it, continue to ask for it, because why should we be working in different, you know, stratospheres of documentation? So it's a great thing to ask for, and I think it's an appropriate thing to ask for.
Thank you.
My husband bought Xactimate. That's how you do the
Right.
and did our house that way and fought line by line by line using that tool.
It's an intuitive tool. I will say that, you know, it's a little funky if you've never dealt with an estimating tool, but it does have a lot of search options. It allows you to search under the average or the unit pricing, which is just generic. It allows you to search in even in eBay and Amazon. It allows you to do a very wide search. And the nice thing about it, it creates a URL that you can add to the comment section, which automatically tells them where you got the price. So if someone is clever enough to figure out Exactware, it is a great benefit to figure it out. And I will also tell you that learning Exactware is probably the simplest way now. It's just to watch YouTube videos. YouTube is the best place to learn how to use Exactware. I actually had a contractor who had 25 years of experience, never used Exactware, and he was able to learn it to write a $250,000 estimate over a weekend. So there are free resources out there to learn Exactware. Contents is a very simplified program rather than just estimating for a house. So I'd say if you want to do it and you want to capture, by all means, Exactware is a good way to start for Exactware contents.
So Chris had just popped out that he's in Colorado, or they're in Colorado. They were denied, and then they're saying it's proprietary. But if it's an Xactimate file, it's not proprietary, right?
You know, there's a lot of conversation that we hear. In California, we have some laws that allow us to ask for claims-related documents. I don't know if that is actually the same way in Colorado, but even in California, those things that we have identified as being claims-related documents, we still get the standard pushback, oh, that's proprietary, oh, that's work product. It's not. It's actually what is used to determine the loss. And so it's not proprietary unless you're trying to hide something. So the response that I give is, I would think that you would want me to have as much information as you do. So it's not proprietary unless you're an attorney. That's my push. But, you know, it depends upon how much you want to push into your adjuster, but I would never accept from an adjuster telling me that this is work product or proprietary when you have asked me on multiple occasions, please share your ESX. If you're willing to ask for it, you have to be willing to give it out as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Corey. And just a reminder to all of our panelists, our Spanish language interpreter asked us to slow down a bit. So my apologies for getting us animated. This example here is just, inventory submitted, what it came back from an insurance company. And then you can see that replacement cost, the depreciation, and what was paid was that actual cash value.
There is also a point to be made that, at least in California, we push against them depreciating tax. Tax is not a depreciable item. So, if you're starting to see your tax depreciated, that's the first thing you say, hey, tax is not depreciated. Taxman's got to get paid no matter what. So that's not
Right.
that I allow in my adjustments for them to depreciate.
And the same with shipping. That's just a hard cost.
That is a hard cost. That's part of the unit pricing. And I actually had a client that had 5,000 still photos from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s movie star photos. And it was just part of the cost that you had to pay through eBay to get the item. You wouldn't get it in any other way, and you couldn't get it in a store. So with a lot of arguing, they actually paid the additional. I mean, the photo was $2, but the shipping and handling was $8.99 per photo for all 5,000 items. So it adds up. So don't allow them to simply say, oh, that's the way it is. No, it's not. It's negotiable.
All right. And I think we've already touched on this quite a bit, but just to end this section with just being aware of excessive depreciation. As Corey said, it should be negotiated on case by case basis, that line items, as Lois said, to reflect the condition of each of those items. And here's a resource for a depreciation guide if you're wondering what would be standard, for some things. Computers depreciate quickly, furniture not as much. I've lost my mouse, sorry about this. I've already showed that one. All right, so we're going to jump on finishing your list. So this is a recap or the greatest hits list on our in-depth workshop on building your inventory. Just asking family, friends, neighbors to review your list, leveraging their memories to recall items you've had. You're not going to remember anything. If you haven't already done it, going online to shop, going window shopping with that gift registry scanner. Those visual cues really can help you jar your memory. And then, being aware of how many of what you had. So the example for books is, go to Barnes and Noble, go to your friend's house and just see how many paperbacks, hardbacks they would have had on a shelf. You'll be surprised how many books can fit on a 2-foot shelf. And if you had six shelves, suddenly, that's thousands of dollars. And so being aware of that, the same with closets, did you bunch your items close together? Did you space far apart? One of our staff members, in updating her inventory, just did in her head, she thought her husband had 5 dress shirts, and she looked and he had 16 because he kept them close together. So that little section was very expensive. And so being aware of that, and then always reaching out to any stores that you've shopped at to see if they have information that they can give you to substantiate what you would have purchased and where. As Corey had mentioned earlier, when they're talking about your taxes, some things might have been a gift to you, right? And so you didn't purchase it, but it's a gift from somebody else, and you're still entitled to that because you owned it. Mm-hmm. And then using those free tools, I know the link has already been put in the chat, about what other disaster survivors had in their inventory, so you can see what you might have missed. And then, just leveraging someone else's brain power to see all the different items there so that, again, jarring your memory.
So before we get too far removed from this, Corey, there's two questions in the chat. What formula can be used for shipping, for the prices of shipping? And when is tax and shipping declared and recovered?
I think you make that part of the unit cost. And I think if you're making comments to the right in an Excel sheet, you just simply say, here's the unit cost, here's the unit price, the tax, and the shipping, and then it's all one cost. I wouldn't try to parse this out in multiple lines below the line item. I would make it as simple as we could. And that's the unit cost. If we're all dealing with unit cost, then that is the cost. If an item costs $10, but the tax is $2 and to ship it is $8, the unit price is 20. It's not 8.
Thank you.
All right.
And that's paid when you put your receipt in. Like, we replaced our winter coats. And I think on our contents list, we probably said, it's going to cost $350. Well, lo and behold, when you buy it on Amazon and you get it and it was $387 or something like that, they paid the receipt cost. They didn't pay what we said it would cost.
That's a benefit that you got, because sometimes I've been in that fight where they've assessed it at, you said it was 300, they assessed it at 150, and then you go ahead and replace it and it's what you said it was, and then they fight with you saying, well, no, you upgraded. You quite honestly, you overspent because we've evaluated this as being only 150. Well, no, you lowballed me. We evaluated it. We told you what it was. Here's the URL. You just decided that you didn't want to pay attention to that. So then that becomes the additional fight that you have. But it sounds like, Lois, they didn't give you that fight, so you were much farther ahead.
I think it's because you know what coat you wear all the time.
Right.
And we bought that coat. We didn't get a different brand. We didn't get it, we bought what we said we were going to buy because that's what we lost.
Right.
We didn't, we didn't upgrade. It was the coat we lost.
There is a bias that you're going to find with pricing companies, and it's either in Servio or, a few other, host of characters that work constantly with insurance companies, that even though you say that you bought it at Patagonia and you knew that you were going to be spending $400 or $500 on it, they'll go ahead and look on the cheapest place that they can and
right.
put it out. And then the carrier will stand up and go, well, our company has researched this and they say that this price is only X. Well, no, they searched and found this at Walmart. And, maybe it says it's Patagonia, more than likely it's not, but it looks like it's the same blue coat. Yeah, it really depends upon the effectiveness of the carrier, the effectiveness of the vendor, and how myopic you're being and looking directly at what they're paying, because there's going to be a lot of errors, even from well-established contents inventory companies. It always comes down to the person that's typing that day.
And if you don't put in, I bought this book at Barnes and, you say, I have a coffee table book by John Felder that was $85 from Barnes and Noble. They are gonna lowball you. And if you don't say where you were buying it or where'd you get that price, they are going to come up with the cheapest toaster from Walmart.
Agreed.
If you don't say, I had a 6-slice toaster from Williams-Sonoma, and here's my URL where I bought it,
Right.
where I got my price. Because if you don't put that in there, they're going to put the cheapest thing in there.
Right, which is why, whatever documentation you've got that shows where you shopped helps make that case.
Right.
And then this section on refining quantity estimates, it's just a refresher on that piece, but the average American woman owning 103 articles of clothing, that is not necessarily true. Depends on your lifestyle. I've got a friend who lost her home in the '03 Cedar fire. Her husband's a doctor. They had the holiday party every year. Every year she went to Nordstrom's and bought a new dress because she couldn't be seen in the same dress. And so it's 25 years worth of dresses worn one time, but they owed her for those in her closet, right? She wasn't going to go rebuy all of those dresses, but they did owe her for 25 like new dresses. So being aware of what you've got, and the fact that most people have clothes they aren't wearing, they bought, they're holding. So, being aware of what you have. Okay, and then this caution, I know this might have been mentioned on the Survivor last night, so just want to make it very clear. UP's guidance is that you would never intentionally claim items you did not have or inflate the value, quality, or quantity of those damaged or destroyed items. Insurance fraud is a felony. That's intentional misrepresentation. And this can jeopardize your entire claim and subject you to severe legal penalties. Making a mistake, very common, as you will see on their part. It can be an innocent mistake on your part as well. That's not insurance fraud, but deliberately claiming things you don't have to inflate that, it is. And as Corey mentioned earlier, claiming everything is newer than 5 years, that flags to say they're trying to pull something over on us. So being very clear about what's what. If you have that futon from college that's 20 years old, put that down there. Don't make it a 5-year-old futon.
Yeah, I had a client that the question came up that they had a total loss fire, and they lived in something that didn't qualify as having a Rolex, but they received a gift as a Rolex, and they absolutely had a Rolex. But do you claim the Rolex, even though there's no way in the world that where you lived is representative of someone that had a Rolex, even if you explain it away? In that case, I recommend to the client, leave this as an open item until you find a photograph or someone to validate that you had a Rolex. The last thing you want to do is put a Rolex on your list and you live in a triple wide mobile home. And not that we're saying that it's a bad thing to live in a triple wide mobile home, but having a Rolex, it doesn't really speak to you living in there, and that you're being classified, no doubt, but you're going to be giving your list to someone that's going to look at this and they're going to look for things that look abnormal. So if something seems out of character, even though you may have it, you might want to list it as an open item subject to further verification that we're working on. That way you give them a heads up, it's there, but you're not putting a price with it, and you're telling them, I'm looking for further documentation as this was a gift.
And that feeds into pricing, right? It was a gift. I inherited it from my grandfather, whatever it is, and so you want it to reflect the quality of the item you had. You might need to add that detail. I know on Lois's inventory, there were things that were inherited this from a grandparent. And so that was just part of the description of that item, was to make it clear that while this might not fit the lifestyle you think I led, I have this. And so just being very clear on that piece. And then valuable collections, and someone in the chat or the Q&A had asked about the definition of a collectible. I will say, be a little cautious of labeling items as collectibles. My mother was a Beanie Babies collector. Those things are not worth very much unless they're in pristine condition. So, being clear at what that is. Is it a statue? Is it artwork? Is it a figurine? Describing that and saying set of 12, glass figurines, right? Versus, you describe them individually, but a collectible doesn't necessarily, just labeling it a collectible doesn't necessarily do you a favor.
Right.
But for valuable items, these are the characteristics that you're looking for. And I said this again, sorry about that being there twice. Again, being organized, being strategic, as Lois said, you're unlikely to replace everything you've lost. So you want to maximize those ACV payments, arguing for lower depreciation, and then replacing those items that are strategic for you so that you keep as much cash on hand, especially if you're banking on using some of your contents money for your rebuild. And then someone had asked in the chat about, sorry, let me go back here, about using, I believe it was Travelers. I know State Farms and Travelers both will offer you an insurance consultant to help you with your claim. I find they're useful for people who struggle to get their list together, but just like anything that you would have submitted to the insurance company, you're going to have to verify and look through it to make sure that it's accurate and it reflects the information you gave. It will involve an interview. And so it's not sparing you from the work of doing the contents inventory. It's just giving you a resource to help with that. And what they give you back is a product that you would still edit and update to reflect any misconceptions there. And Corey, I know this is, this inventory piece is complicated. Do you recommend people take advantage of that, or is it a concern that they're a captive audience there for the insured?
I've had good results when the carrier has brought out a inventory company, and in cases of Inservio, they have come out and had a really good inventory because it was not a burn from sight, but it was actually there. They counted it, documented it. There are multiple companies that are available. If you just look it up, contents inventory company or service or whatever you want to look up, and ask them, what do you do? How do you do? And are you beholden to the insurance company, or do you, actually document what's here? I've had great success. If I knew who the inventory company was, them coming out, I felt very comfortable with what they did. They don't assess any sort of value to it if it's still there. I've also had success with finding my own inventory company that will do a burn from site interview. But it is a laborious task. You are reliving the loss over and over and over again, but that is what's required by some people who just can't put it down on paper. They're too busy, it's too traumatizing, they can only do this in short spurts. In that case, you might need to have a professional sit with you, put it together. That professional then will price it, depreciate it based upon what you're saying, and then further work with you. And yeah, you're going to pay a little bit of money, but you're also going to recoup probably 20 or 30 times that cost by using a professional. So it depends, it really depends upon who you're engaging with, whether that person is working directly for you or they're just some sort of, preferred vendor. The last thing you want to do is a preferred vendor coming out that always does this for the insurance companies. And so they have a stream of income that they want to protect. And that being a preferred vendor, they're always going to look to the guidelines that the insurance company puts on them. And I will caution you also that when you start talking with the insurance company about them sending out their own people, you need to ask, is this a preferred vendor? If it is, what are the guidelines that you're sending along with the assignment to the preferred vendor? That is very fair to ask, because every insurance company that I'm dealing with right now has a preferred vendor system, and that they give them guidelines of what we want to see and what we don't want to see.
Thank you for that, Corey.
We need to slow down just a little bit for
I
these.
see the comment. I got called for saying too fast. I apologize to the interpreter.
All right, well, we're going to take a deep breath here.
So I'd like to just say that for all of you putting questions in the chat, any of them that I can answer, I am trying to, and we will do our best to get to them, depending on how long we have some pre-submitted questions. And so we'll kind of see what our time looks like.
Thank you. All right, and so the next steps, just highlighting what happens after you submit your inventory. And we've talked about this. So, you know, again, you're gonna get back their report. They're gonna have depreciated it. You're going to make sure the items are correct. And then you're going to look at that, you know, that depreciation and challenge the things that are appropriate, right? Because you're the only person that knows the condition of the items that were destroyed. They're not there. There's no way for them to do that.
This is a really important one. There were things on our list that came back that weren't ours. So, you know, they got us confused with somebody else and we called them out on that. This isn't ours, take it off. And,
Right.
and we did, there was a lot of negotiation happening once that list came back to us.
And
That
you're going to
sounds
refine
rather-
it.
That sounds rather odd, Lois. If you're using exactware, there wouldn't be any reason that other items would mysteriously show up.
We didn't use Exactware. We used Xactimate for the house, but we used our own
Inventory.
Excel sheet. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So they retyped it in with errors.
And probably mingled somebody's pages with yours, which is not reassuring.
Right.
There is one item that I don't think anyone's discussed, and I didn't see it in the PowerPoints. I like to, when I submit the demand on behalf of clients, I like to ask for another advance. It locks them into paying more money, and
Nice.
it really depends upon what you want to ask for. But if they've only advanced a small amount of money, I wouldn't, and personally, I ask for at least half the inventory that I'm presenting, because you don't want the money to keep sitting with them, and it's going to take 3 more months or 4 more months for them to do it. Why should that sit in their bank account drawing interest? So in the case that you're presenting it to them $400,000 to $500,000 in an inventory, I don't see any reason why you can't ask for another advance of at least half. They won't give it to you, but unless you ask, they won't give you anything.
Right. And it never hurts to ask.
Exactly.
All right. And this is our couch example that Annie was mentioning. If it's rarely touched, the age should not matter. If it's 20 years old, but it's like new, then it should be considered like new. Mine with dogs and kids, definitely depreciating to 80%. And then we've covered this before, but this is just a reminder. If you have that replacement cost policy, they're only going to pay you that ACV up front until you meet your loss settlement provisions. And this is an example of those loss settlement provisions. And I know we had a question and then on the chat, but I'm going to hold on that until we get to our other questions. Just a reminder, there is a time limit to collect replacement cost benefits in California. You have 36 months from the date of the first payment for ACV. In Colorado, you have a time limit of 365 days after your total loss claim to submit your inventory. And also, sorry, the other slide should be here. And then after your last ALE payment, you have 365 days to submit your receipts for those other items. I have that slide later. I'm not sure where it went. And then we're going to dive into these questions that were pre-submitted, okay? So question number 1. It feels like we can't get the stated full value policy limits without a lot of information. So how do we maximize for the full value of contents? And so I'm going to let Lois and Corey share what they think of this, what they would recommend. I think Lois, you've mostly shared your strategy already, right? going
So-
through that list.
As I'm reading this, it's USAA, and as a benefit of being a USAA insured, it's a policy benefit that they pay you 75% of your coverage for contents, leaving 25% for you to come after. So for a USAA insured, you're from day one be given all of coverage A for your building and 75% of coverage C. The only way that you're going to secure the other 25% is to prove the first 75% with a complete inventory. So it's going to be as if they didn't pay you anything. So you're going to inventory and prepare as if they didn't give you anything, because you have to prove the first 75% that they gave you and the 25% that they haven't given you. So it's nothing less than a full inventory with a full explanation, just like Lois discussed.
There, yeah. It's not, yeah. I'm sorry.
All right, question 2. We have Tina, Rona, and Marcus all basically with the same question about vintage antique items. How do they ensure they get paid the value for those, that full value?
You're going to have to go on the Easter egg hunt and find it in all the secondary sources that you've listed, eBay, replacement.com. You're going to have to find perhaps also auction houses for what you're talking about that might be valuable enough to be auctioned off. So it's no different than the toaster that you purchased at Williams-Sonoma. You're going to have to document every single item and probably start talking to collectors. If you've got such vintage items, there are going to be collectors out there that might turn you on to something, and then ask them for a valuation. Maybe you're going to have to pay a collector a fee for them to give you a verification of an item. Yeah, you're going to have to pay a small fee, but if that item is worth tens of thousands of dollars, that fee will pay itself back. And you can also ask for, the cost that you expended to get that fee, to get that quote for that. But high-end items are going to have to be validated just probably even more so than even average day items. And there's just no way around that. But the nice thing about having vintage items that you're proving in the marketplace is that's the market price. So there is no depreciation. So you're going to have to put that in your inventory and then put a little reminder to the adjuster or the estimator, hey, by the way, this is the market price, so there is no depreciation.
I had quite a few antiques. I used all of those places, eBay, replacements.com, firstdibs.com, Etsy, and an auction house. And I sent the exact, I had pictures of my dining room table was antique. I had one of those drop-down desks. They did not, I started the line item with the word antique, and I ended the line item with the word antique. So I, made sure they knew it was an antique, and they didn't depreciate any of my antiques.
Sorry about that. Let me go back because I did have one question in the chat about collectibles. Chris's policy states they have a limit of 2,500 on stamps, trading cards, and comic books, including any of these that are part of the collection. And so the question is, does that mean they can't define anything else besides those 3 items as collectibles? Because they had Hot Wheels that aren't antiques, but they have value and are collected. He just making sure he wouldn't be limited to that 2,500 for those items.
Yeah, if they're calling out a specific item, it's that specific item, not all items.
Got it. Thank you.
Is it fair to say that I know the insurance industry looks at 25 years or older as an antique, that it would have to be 25 years or older.
I heard that an antique is 100 years old. but
Yeah, yeah, it's 100, yeah.
Okay.
But some of them are defining vintage as 25, yeah.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily buy you much, yeah. And Elizabeth's question is just, how to be successful in the negotiations to get full value. And I think we've covered this fairly well. But Corey, anything you want to add besides, I loved your point of when I make the submittal, just going ahead and asking for that next advance or half of what's submitted so that you're bringing it up.
Well, you got to get them used to paying more money. So you might as well ask for it because you've spent all this time putting together a document that creates all sorts of internal havoc, having relived the loss over and over and over countless months. You might as well ask for the money up front now and see what the response is. They'll probably go and say, well, no one does that. No one asks us. Well, guess what? You're in the business of risk and you need to pay us for more money. We didn't do this for free. So I think that the question of how to be successful is about your preparation. You're going to be successful if you prepare. And preparation is reading your policy, knowing your policy, preparing a complete inventory that is room for room. And it could be wall for wall because it's going to take that kind of mental exercise to preserve what you lost. And sometimes you have to engage in products such as memory joggers. I know United Policyholders has a memory jogger. I utilize a memory jogger, which is very expansive and it's based upon inventories that clients have given me. Sometimes you have to get catalogs of the favorite places that you purchase from, and just simply start picking the items that you can recall. I know that when you have club memberships with Costco and with Sam's Club, it's very simple to go to them and find out what have you bought there in the last 10 years. And they'll print it all out. The same can be said for Amazon, eBay. You all have sources that you can find appropriate documentation, but that doesn't take away from the requirement that you spend the time to put it on the list and give a proper and complete explanation.
Thank you.
I think my husband went back to the negotiations part. He would negotiate one line item. And he did it assertively and politely. I mean, some of the conversations with the adjuster were an hour or longer, just talking about, no, she didn't use those skis that often. He just really, tried to be human with the adjuster and saying, and just taking the time to think about and talk about with the adjuster each item that he didn't agree with the price.
The human element is probably the best way forward and also the most infuriating.
Yes.
It really depends upon the receptiveness of the adjuster and probably coming in as non-combative at the beginning and allow that back and forth to mature itself into a conversation that you can both see eye to eye is probably more beneficial than having a very explosive conversation straight off. Even though you're frustrated, even though you have lost everything, and that person on the other side of the phone or Zoom meeting is not caring because their job is to process, because they're in they're handling widgets in a factory. But you have to get to that person in order for them to humanize what you're presenting to them. And that just comes with conversation. And I think, Lois, that's the best example that you said your husband dealt with one item at a time. And that's probably select the biggest one, because you might as well get as much as you can for the biggest one. And then maybe spending that time will gain benefits for everything else. Because if they feel that you absolutely documented to the nth degree every single thing you've talked about, more than likely you did that for everything.
Right.
Right. And this actually feeds into Betsy's question. So this is serendipity here. She's submitted the inventory, got it back. They've reduced that RC, and she's submitted those links. So, Betsy, the answer would be to go back to them on these specific line items and say, I've submitted the link that supports my replacement costs. And I need you to make these corrections, and treat it just very matter of factly. Evidently this is an error on your part. Can you please fix these back to where they should be? And as Corey said, these are this is the actual cost of these items. And treating it as a non-negotiable, but just very matter of fact, this is something to be corrected. Please fix this.
I agree. And her example that she had some larger items, the 2 MacBook Pros that were $2,000 new and expensive pair of boots. The one thing that no one mentions is the MacBook, the computers are not isolated items. They have countless software items inside. So if you're not capturing all the countless software items that you have inside, and likely that's just a market price. If I said that I had Castle Wolfenstein in my computer, which quite honestly I do, going back 10 years, it still works. It works fine. There's no depreciation, and I have to go find that software. So when you're saying I have a MacBook Pro, but I bought it 10 years ago, you also have to list all the countless bits of software that you purchased and put in there. And maybe you recover and get back to a little bit more better footing by being that complete with what you're talking about.
Okay. And Sheila's question actually kind of feeds into another question in the Q&A. So how to get the insurance to pay for those non-salvageable goods? And then in the chat, we have somebody who was told don't buy anything until we finish going through this to figure out if these things are salvageable. And she's like, I need a coat, I need a winter coat, I need these things. And so for Corey, I think you're the only one who's going to have experience in dealing with the partial losses like that. What should people need to know about this part?
If we're talking about a partial loss, this is one of the unique areas that gets missed heavily. So if you have a partial loss and it's not a burn from site and you're still items in there, so let's just say the outside of the house got singed, but the inside of the house still has items in it. There is a crucial piece of money that needs to be captured. And I'm not sure if you can do it yourself. You may have to engage a professional to come in. A pack out cost for a partial loss is crucial to get estimated. So in cases that you have, let's say a 2,000 square foot home, actually I have, as an example, I have a partial loss to a 3-car garage here locally. It's for and it involves a 3,800 square foot house that had their things, their parents' things, and their other parents' things. And it was just a huge house full of things. That alone has money value. I went in and figured the pack out cost and cleaning and storage and return and unbox and disposal of the boxes and stuffings for $314,000. That's a cost that doesn't get depreciated. That's a cost that has to be paid. So in the case of salvageable versus non-salvageable, you're dealing with now a small amount of items that are non-salvageable, lists, inventories, pricing. But the other piece of it is the pack out. That house can't be repaired with it, all the things sitting in it. That has an enormous amount of money value that maybe you don't want to spend $314,000 to do all that, but guess what? You're owed for it. And the
All
other
right.
piece of not receiving the list, it's, you got to follow up. You got to fax it to, hey, you didn't get it? Let me fax it to you. Let me overnight it to you. Where can I overnight this to? It sounds more like the, loan modification game than it does an insurance company that I don't have this 4 times. Sounds very suspect.
All right, well, let's get going. We've got just a few more questions to go. Jeff and Carolyn plan to come up with an RCV that includes tax and shipping and then depreciate. And this is to take, guidance we've given in other webinars is don't leave it to them to do the depreciation. If you're able to, go ahead and do your own, because that's been several survivors have reported success with that. And then the other question is, adding an appropriate fixed shipping cost for each item. One insurer in the chat said, don't add shipping or tax. I can see some insurers just saying, don't add sales tax because we'll add it uniformly at the end. But how would you annotate those items for shipping? Just add that to the description saying cost of item plus shipping.
Yes. Yeah, you got to cap somewhere.
All right, well, then that makes sense. And so your valuation would be both for the shipping for that item. And then you're just going to put that in your description that it includes both, and you can put the breakout in there. Annie, Lois, just how to fill these out with just this exhausting mental work.
It is.
Yeah, I discovered I had to quit by 2 p.m. Otherwise I would have nightmares. So I would, I treated myself really well. I bought flowers for my desk. I used lots of highlighters and all kinds of sticky notes on the wall. I tried to take breaks often. Give yourself kindness. This is the hardest job you've ever done. Ask friends for help. Ask your kids for help. Make a party out of it. Have people come over and say, let's do a kitchen. Go to somebody else's kitchen and do your kitchen. And then that will trigger it for you. It's hard. This is the hardest thing.
That's a brilliant suggestion, Lois. Go to someone else's kitchen that's still standing and
Right.
then what you had. I mean, that's a brilliant suggestion.
Or go to your best friend's closet.
Yeah.
It helps. And don't, you have a year, you still have some more time. You don't have to do it all at once. Try and do something normal also in your day. This cannot, it did overtake my life for a year, but be good to yourself. That's the only way.
Thank you for that.
And the only thing I'd like to add is before you go to bed, have a piece of paper by your bed and write whatever those items are that you think of, because otherwise your brain will not turn off. But once you make that note, it kind of gives you that space.
Thank you all for that. So Marcus's question is one we've also had in the Q&A, and basically just to summarize, they're strategizing they've heard that's helpful, like submitting. Some people will submit chunks of it. Some will wait until they complete the inventory. Some wait on timing. And so do any of those strategies work? And is it a good idea to include that cover letter of context, right? Saying, hey, we lived here, we have salaries, we have these type of family. Is that useful? And Corey, I think this is more a question for you.
Quite honestly, there's an unspoken rule of thumb that I know adjuster. I was an adjuster for 26 years, so I can speak of that before I was a public adjuster for the last 8. So there is a rule of thumb in evaluating a total loss by the following: how long have they lived here, and how much do they make? And the rule of thumb, this goes back a little bit, is generally people will add $20,000 a year to contents in their house. Is that accurate? No, but this is the training that adjusters get subliminally. And so then they'll say, well, these people lived there for 10 years, so likely they have $200,000 in debt and loss there, and it goes up from there. So you can extrapolate that they have more than $20,000 in things that they've added per year based upon how much more they make. So yeah, I see the point of them saying financial context of salaries, investments, family connections. Quite honestly, if you have pictures of family gatherings that you have saved in your iCloud, that probably speaks better than, giving a financial statement. I mean, they're going to ask you how much, normally from what I've seen from State Farm, when they've done these kind of pre-interviews with clients who've lost everything, they do ask these questions. What do you do? How much do you make? I mean, these are bad questions to ask. I don't know if they still do it, but that's what they're gauging. How long were you living there? How much did you make? These are the 2 key items that they're using to ballpark your claim already, with just that soft interview outside the trailer in the schoolyard when they're going to give you an advance payment.
All right, thank you. Our interpreter needs a short break, and so we're not going to advance to the next slide, but I wanted to just give an opportunity for the 3 of you just to share some general things you'd like people to know about getting through this contents process. And I'm going to quit sharing my screen for this minute.
And I could start with, we formulated a group called Coffee Strong after our fire. And so we had Wine Wednesday. And that Wine Wednesday was, you can come wine with us, WHINE. And there was a lot of resources that were shared during those whining sessions. There was also some congratulations going around, some very, very real excitement when your dirt got moved around that other people wouldn't understand. But forming that support system, especially for this part of the process, is really beneficial to you. You can, they understand your frustration. These people understand what you're going through, what your loss was. And people had great ideas. One person said, that they put pieces of paper on their dining room table, their temporary dining room table, and they taped them and they wrote the names of the rooms on each one of them. And when that room filled up, they put another piece of paper down. But that way they weren't consumed with these items going through their head, because they immediately could go and just write it down. So any little thing you can do to, so for me, it was more like getting rid of that information, so you didn't have to keep dwelling on it, because this is without a doubt the most emotional part of your recovery. And every time you think of something, I mean, I'm 5 years out, and my boyfriend and I will go somewhere and I'll go, yeah, I had one of those. And but you forget what you used to have, or how you used it, or that you played with it with your son when he was little. And so verbalizing, talking to each other, all of that has a lot of value. Lois?
Our community wants to help us. Let them. if you belong to the Quilt Guild, let them help you shop or help you take care of your kids, or we live in an amazing community and they want to help us.
And we are really bad about receiving. It's so
We're
much easier
very-
to give than to receive. And this is probably, thanks for bringing it up, Lois. This is the one time in your life that you need to accept the help.
Right. And ask for exactly what you need.
Mhm.
I need help learning Excel.
Yeah.
You know, so the librarian will help you do that. I need help starting my list. I need to come over. I can't tell you how many of my friends I would, would be meeting for something. I'd say, do you mind if I go through your junk drawer? Sure, that's fine. You want a piece of paper? Or they'd send me a picture of their junk drawer.
Mhm.
Or and my kids, they would just do anything. They want to help. Let them help.
And my son was fully grown when our house burnt down, and he had a lot of things in it. And he itemized all of his stuff, but he also was very good about saying, "Oh, Mom, remember this, remember that." And he had a different perspective on it. So it was kind of interesting because it was a lot of the stuff I would have missed.
And I missed, I have two children, both grown and out of the house, and they both had things in the barn, and it's gone. And they did their part with that too. And also my siblings were really good about sending me pictures
Mhm.
of our holiday gatherings that really helped. You could put the all call out to, you were at my party, you took pictures. Do you have any of those? Could I have them back?
Yep.
It's okay they want to help.
Yeah, they really do. And they just need some guidance on what.
Right,
Um,
right.
My
You can-
brother, I'm sorry.
yeah,
My
go ahead.
brother, my son is his only nephew. And so he had every picture known to man of him. And every week he would send me an envelope or a little box, and it might only have 3 pictures in it, but that's how he kept my spirits up. And it came every week until he said, I just had to go through stuff, dig through stuff. And he said, I didn't want to give them all to you at once. I wanted to feed it to you slowly, so you kind of had a little bit of hope and a little bit of, oh, wow, I have that one back. That was one of my favorites.
Yes, yes. That's when you're thankful you had some family that were keepers that
Yep.
give things back. Yeah.
We have a lot of people who I think are struggling with the 1 year. And I'd just like to address it because we've had a number of questions in the chat, in the Q&A. And that 1 year holds true for Colorado, but you can ask for an extension. And if they grant you the extension, please make sure that you document that in an email so that you have a record of that, so that they can't come back and say, oh, we didn't say that.
That's a great point, Annie. I would emphasize that even though you're doing a log of your interactions with your insurance company, you need to put them on notice after every conversation. Pursuant to our conversation, this is what we discussed, this is what we left open, this is what we agreed upon. Each and every conversation has to be documented. Email is probably the most superior source of doing that.
Corey, can you speak to, we've had people expressly with State Farm who the adjusters are now telling them that they don't do email. And our only answer we've been able to come up with, obviously, is send an email to any email address at State Farm consistently. So you have documentation.
Yeah.
Or you could do a certified letter, which I've been known to do.
Okay.
State Farm has a universal email, source. It goes directly into the file. So even though the adjuster says, we don't do email, that is what they used to say 8 years ago. They've gotten away from that. There is a one unifying email. Let me see if I can find it.
I'm glad I brought this up. That's great.
Fair Plan is the same way. Fair Plan has a universal email source. Pacific Specialty has a unified email source that goes directly into the claim file. Farmers Insurance has a universal claim drawer that goes into the claim file. All you have to do is put on the reference line the claim number, and it goes directly into the claim file.
And I have heard, do not put your name, do not muddy it up with anything else but that claim number. Is
The
that
claim number, and maybe after it, you can put your last name, but don't do a lot of referencing, because the person who looks at that in the IT department is only looking for the claim number. They don't want the policy number. They want the address. They don't care about that. They Assurance Solutions, if anyone is with them, oh, I'm so sorry. They have a universal claim drawer that dumps right into the claim file. So under State Farm,
Well, Corey, let's get you to put those in the chat so they're the right one.
sure. Make sure
Oh.
that I pulled it up here.
And
But,
we're
but
actually
each and
Okay.
every adjuster with State Farm has an individual email, and the person that has said that we don't do email is incorrect, because there is an obligation the adjuster has to provide you with a means of which to present them with documentation or questions. So just put them on blast and say, how should I put this documentation to you? How should I pose questions to you that we're documenting the file? And you're putting them on into a tight corner by saying, oh, we don't do email. Well, how am I supposed to communicate with you with questions when I need to document the loss? And, if you're not getting answers from your adjuster, hang up and call the customer service number. When you call customer service, that's not in the claims department. The customer service will tell you everything you want to know: how to call them, how to fax them, how to send documents to their claim drawer. And if that's not satisfactory, then you can ask the customer service, what's the manager's name and contact number for my adjuster? And then start at that level.
Did that a lot.
That's that. And here's another little thing that I had to do, and I had to do it last night, and it bore fruit today. LinkedIn, of all places, LinkedIn is your best resource source to find out who you're dealing with, because most insurance professionals today want to get their next job. So they're all on LinkedIn. They all talk how well they do things, how long they've done things. So you get to have a complete background investigation for no cost, as long as you register with LinkedIn. And the nice thing about that too is their name is usually, not always, but usually their email. And you just have to figure out through Rocket Reach or a few other sources online, what is the email format. Sometimes you just have to Google, what is Hartford's email format? I got to tell you, I reached into the vice president of claims and the vice president operational of claims for Hartford, and lo and behold, I had an adjuster who called me today that had been going solo for 6 weeks. So there is a way to find out what you need to know.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So we're back on with our interpreter, and I want to get us on question 9. We've got just a few more questions, and I'm going to get us wrapped up here. My apologies for running later than intended. And I think we've already dealt with the first part of this. You've got a lot of valuable possessions, no proof available. That the answer that I have is document what you are able to provide, be it, as Lois said, photos from family and friends who were at holiday gatherings at your house, your documentation, it's limited to what you have available with the people, the resources you have available. It's not going to be a lot, and they know that. So it's just focusing on what you can provide. And then, as Corey said, remembering to, those memory jogs, you've got our inventories to look at, other resources. Please take advantage of those.
She said, I don't know how to deal with the massive art collection I lost in the fire. I drew pictures of my house and, just sketches. But then I can remember what picture was here, what picture was by the door, what, just do your own, like your dining room table, Annie. Draw the house and you'll remember. You'll remember what was on your walls. I have a friend who changes her art out during the seasons. So she could even do it for the seasons, because as she goes through the seasons, she'll remember what she brought out in the spring and what she brought out for Christmas.
Yeah.
Go slow.
And
It'll come.
tap the family, right? Did they
Oh,
have
yeah.
a photo? Does somebody else have a photo of it from the person you inherited? You've got it from grandmother's house. Take advantage of that wider network of family and friends to pull that out.
Yeah, your friends want to help, let them.
Right. And then, Corey, this is a technical question from Lisa. Can we claim items purchased with gift cards donated to Marshall Fire victims? Claim the central air units on personal property? My understanding of, if you're replacing items you had, it's not, you've got a receipt tied to it. It doesn't matter if it was your money or a gift card you had, you're replacing items you had, right?
Correct. Items are items, regardless of, whether they were donated, whether or not you inherited them, whether you purchased them with cash or gift cards, they're still your items. You're owed it.
You just need a receipt. All you need is the receipt.
Yeah. As far as the central air units, it's a interesting question. The quick answer is no. You can't claim those under your personal property items. Unless they're additional to what you have for the house, and that they're in good working order and you replace them and they're just sitting in your garage. You get into an argument as being, oh, well, do those supplies go for the house, go towards the house or the contents? I would have to make the argument, I already have them on my house. These are just additional items that I was going to use for something else. Donate, sell, whatever. Make the argument. What's the worst that can happen? Make the argument. And never accept the just because rule. There is no such thing as the just because rule. Always say to them, where can I find that in my policy? I need to understand that better. Where can I find that in my policy? Let's open up our hymnals and read from the policy. Where can I find that limitation?
Thank you. Janet had asked about using her self-created table that has the information versus the specific format the insurance company has provided. She has State Farm, which I goes back to State Farm and Travelers will provide you somebody to help do that. Meaning they'll put it in that format for you and interview you to do that. So making that argument. Yeah.
And I'd like to clarify, because Janet was on our webinar last night and she had this question and I did not give her the correct answer. So talking to Val today, she said that they don't have to you didn't want to do the list with them, but they can convert it over for you.
Yeah, she could have the content specialist take her list, put it into their format, and then they would work with her to finish, any gaps she had if she needed to do that. But you're still going to have to, as you know, with the bowl example, you're still going to have to verify that data is correct. And actually, this goes back to what Corey said. Ask them to show you in the policy where it says you must use that specific format.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are limitations in California. They cannot dictate the format. They can offer suggestions, they can recommend, they can say, oh, please use our format. But they can't boldly say, California, we will not accept your list. If your list is on a bar napkin, they have to accept the list, at least in California.
And what
Well,
about
and-
Colorado?
In Colorado, you should go look at the Department of Insurance's DORA's website for the bulletins they have. But I believe there's a bulletin that the insurance commissioner has said you should be able to provide it in your format. It's a bulletin, it's not a regulation, so it's not binding. But you definitely check, and that would, if they're giving you pushback, I would just go ahead and reach out to the Department of Insurance and ask them to assist you with this issue. Because obviously 3 other adjusters were perfectly fine with what she was doing. All right, let's go back to 12, receipts required.
Yes,
Yes, so generally they are, if you have items that were donated, then you've replaced them without funding. So you're not, Corey, just correct me if I'm wrong, but if you've received an item that was donated, you're not going to receive the replacement value, that differentiation, because you haven't incurred that expense, right?
Right, you won't, exactly.
Okay. All right, 13, got a ways to go, just over the contents limit. And this is that strategy of like, we want to be sufficiently over so that they're going to pay us without receipts. And I don't know that there's a general percentage over that they use. I think it's very subjective. Is that a correct statement, Corey?
I think it really depends upon the carrier. I think that in my experiences with some of the California carriers, Farmers being one of them, they will work to you because they want to get you resolved and move you along. So they may get you to a certain point and say, hey, this is as far as we can get, but if you give us a few more bits of information, we'll help you get the rest of the way. Others are much more stringent. I think they've been mentioned already who they are. But there is no general percentage. Everyone has their own understanding of how much they're going to go along to get you what you need to. You get to just assume that no one's going to give you a freebie and you have to prove it all the way.
Thank you. This next statement is Colorado laws on depreciation. Just what you need to know about that. California's laws on depreciation. Susan's question, if my contents claim exceeds the covered amount of my policy, is there any way to increase the covered amount? Corey, my guess is no.
It depends. If you have Kemper has a really great package policy that I was surprised for one of the losses for the campfire. That quite honestly, in a case of a catastrophe, all boats rise. So every single bit of their coverages rose, including the contents coverage. So you got to read your endorsements. You got to be specific and understanding what those endorsements say. And what I've told people in the past, get your policy and read it backwards. Read it from the back to the front. Yeah, understand how much your coverage is, but all the changes for your policy for the endorsements are going to be at the rear. And if you start at the beginning, you'll be exhausted by page 10 out of page 30. So save yourself the headache. Read the first page, go to page 30, read it backwards. Then you'll know, probably be better than your adjuster, what the endorsements say, or at least flag it for the adjuster and say, this endorsement says I have replacement costs, and it says I don't have any depreciation applied. Guess what? I found that under a case, and the adjuster didn't know what I was talking about because they've never read the policy. They never read the endorsements. And I'm still fighting with them because they don't know how to read a policy. But it's there. and I have solid grounds to come back to them and say, you know, the depreciation you applied it doesn't conform to the policy. So always read the policy and be weaponized before you start having these conversations.
And so this is the Colorado question about the 1 year. And so here are the statutes that outline this. Am I back now? Sorry, I think I froze here.
No, you're good.
Okay, all right. And so here are the statutes for the state that say you have the 365 days after the total loss to submit the inventory and 365 days after the expiration of your additional living expenses to replace and receive that recoverable depreciation. It does not call out precisely when they pay you, which was a question we had in the chat. And bear in mind, you can ask for an extension. Typically, they're not going to honor an extension if you ask for it 6 months before you need it. You know, because you're usually going to have to provide a reason rationale why you need it. And Corey, anything to add to just the requirements of the policy with that?
Got to read it, got to understand it, got to clarify it, and got to get it confirmed. These are things that you're gonna have to do over and over and over again. So yeah, you're gonna have to do what the policy says. If the policy under your duties say that you have to provide an inventory, and this is what most of the policies do say. It says that the personal property inventory must show the quantity, description, and amount of loss, attach all bills, receipts, and related documents which you have that justifies the figures in the inventory. Guess what? You have to do exactly that because that's a duty under the policy. I would parse that out a little bit by saying, attach all bills, receipts, and related documents which you have. Guess what? You don't have them. They burned up. You do your best. And they will not have to be brutalized with you by saying, well, you didn't give us 3,000 receipts. No one would do that. Quite honestly, that's a ridiculous request. And someone who says, well, you didn't give me receipts for everything, the appropriate, probably reserved response should be, yeah, but I gave you this. So let's work with that.
Right.
So
Thank you.
Cal, the interpreter asked that we slow down a little bit.
All right, I will be slow. Deep breath. But a quick deep breath. I'm going to wrap this up and get us out of here. Just a reminder that we have our yellow book is a tool to help you. So email info@uphelp.org to have a copy mailed to you. The questions we weren't able to answer today, please submit them to our Ask an Expert forum here on our site. Disaster survivors or survivor forums. This is where you register. These are some survivor speak publications that can help you with this process. Our upcoming events here on our uphelp.org/event page. Ask an Expert again. Don't forget that. And again, if you need help with your insurance claim, please reach out to your Department of Insurance. This is the information for California. Here's the information for the Colorado Division of Insurance. And just a quick thank you to our California funders and our Colorado funders. And that is it. And I thank my guests for joining us, and thank you all for your time, and good luck with this process. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And as Carolyn put in the chat, we have a Q&A webinar coming up in October for very specific questions. And don't forget to ask an expert. Corey, Lois, thank you for making time with us. Annie, Karina, our interpreter, Carolyn and Eva, thank you so much.